of salvation keeps Christians rejoicing. When you know about a shadow of a doubt that you're saved, that you know where your life is in the Lord, you know how you are and what you're going to, what's going to happen to you. You have assurance, joy, peace in your salvation. You know. And when I was reading this lesson, I thought about Brother Eric a little bit because he goes boating a lot of times, fishing. He takes my son with him, Justin, and I got to thinking about when you're preparing for a trip. When I prepare to go on a trip, driving trip, I prepare in advance. I'm a big preparer. So I think about, I'm going to need snacks. I'm going to need, I need to make sure in case I break down, if I'm going to have a tire blowout, I need to make sure I have something to change the tire, especially if I'm going alone. I need to make sure that I have my gun in case I'm, someone decides that they're going to hurt me if I stop somewhere. I want my protection with me. I think about that. Do I have, the right ammunition in that gun? I think about that when I'm by myself because I'm a woman. So I'm, in me telling you all this, it's a preparing, when you prepare for something. So I got to thinking about when you prepare to take a trip, like a fishing trip or a trip long term, I can just think about how you prepare for food. You'd make sure that your anchors were there, that you had, whatever things on the ship that you would need for that particular voyage. And so I believe they did that in this, and that's exactly what we're talking about. Acts chapter 27, verse 27. But when the 14th night was come, as we were driven up and down in Adrena, about midnight the shipmen deemed that they drew near to some country. Then, fearing lest we should have fallen upon rocks, they cast 4 anchors out of the stern and wished for the day. And as the shipmen were about to flee out of the ship, when they had let down the boat into the sea under color, as though they would have cast anchors out of the foreship. Verse 31. Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, except these abide in the ship, ye cannot be saved. Verse 32. Then the soldiers cut off the ropes of the boat and let her fall off. Verse 33. And while the day was coming on, Paul besought them all to take meat, saying, this day is the 14th day, that ye have tarried and continued fasting, having taken nothing. So they had still had nothing to eat. Wherefore I pray ye, take some meat, for this is for your health, and there shall not any hair fall upon your head, or fall upon the head of any of you. And when he had thus spoken, he took bread and gave thanks to God in presence of them all, and when he had broken it, he began to eat. And I want to jump down to verse 44. And the rest, some on board and some on broken pieces of the ship, and some it came to pass, and they escaped all safe to land. Well, we know last week, and it's a continuance to this week, that the Lord had already told them that there would be no loss on the ship. The ship would be destroyed, but that the people would be no loss of ship. So that last verse we're going to get to, but our introduction says terrorists that declare war on countries have many goals in their unconventional combat. While they do want to kill and hurt as many people as possible, this doesn't seem to be one of their main desires. They aim to cripple the survivors of their attack by taking away the sense of security. The economy can be crippled when this takes place. People cannot enjoy the basic pleasures of life. In general, the attitude of the country can be turned sour and fearful. Satan has similar methods in dealing with Christians. He knows that one who has the insurance that their sins are forgiven, can be victorious in times of temptation. Therefore, he will try to destroy their faith and sense of security. So that's exactly what the devil's trying to do. Same as terrorists are trying to do. Sometimes they don't always try to destroy everything. It made me think of, I've told Pastor many a times, what do people get out of hacking your bank account? What do they get out of putting a bug on your phone or bugging your computer? They're not sitting across the room watching your computer be bugged and destroyed. They're not getting no thrill out of seeing that. He said it's a thrill out of knowing they can do it to somebody and they don't have to see it be done. And I said, it just drives me crazy. He said, but it's all in their mind. It's the thrill of knowing they're tormenting somebody. That's exactly what the devil does. He gets the thrill out of tormenting us and taking the peace and the joy and the comfort of salvation from us Christians. And that's exactly what was going on here. Make sure if you have anything you want to say to raise your hand and let me know. It says, so they drew near to the country. They drew near. Some of this is kind of saying the same thing that we talked about last week, and they just a continuance. But it says, midnight was the darkest time for these sailors in the storm. They could not see because it was night, nor could they get their direction because the stars were hid from the view. It was a long time until the faintest light of night. The winds drove them to the sea, farther out in the sea, and they could not steer the ship. It became clear that they were not near land. The fear set in upon them when the vessel, they could not figure out where the vessel drew near. This could cause his ship to be dashed upon the rocks, which is what we talked about in Scripture. Have you ever been out in the middle of a storm of life spiritually and you have no idea because you're in the dark, you don't know what's going to happen? That's what we're talking about in Scripture here. When you get to where the rubber meets the road and you're spiritually thrashing out and you're going, but I know if I hit the rocks, I'm going to be destroyed. That's what we come to here. They were so fearful. Brother Eric, have you ever been out in a storm or out in the water and when it's dark and you start to get fearful? Because you have no idea, because you can't see. I mean, I used to love, when we lived when I was a little girl, my dad bought some property. We lived out in Pine Hills, and then my dad bought some property out in Lake County in Astatula. And when I was little, when we lived in the city and we were going out into the country, it was like once we got out of the city into the country, it was like the air changed. We'd have the windows down, and it was like once we hit the country, it would turn cold air. And it was like we could breathe. Us little kids would say, we could breathe, and I would go way out in the field where the horses were, and we would lay out in the field, and we'd watch the stars, because to me, being in the city, living right there in Pine Hills, you couldn't see the stars in the dark sky because there's too many lights. But out there, it was like, it was dark, but you could see because all the stars lit up the sky. And out in the field, you couldn't see real well, but you could see good. I could just imagine that's what they relied on for their light and their direction. And when we're in life and in our storms of life, we rely on the direction of the Lord. But have you ever been in a storm where you can't see him? Let me tell you something. I've been there. When you just can't see the stars and you're saying, Lord, please, I just need to see. I don't know what I'm fixing to hit or where I'm fixing to go. So the sailors wanted to see if they were going close to land as they feared. They sounded, which was attached to a weight, to the line, and they dropped it into the water to see how deep the water was. Now, I don't know if you have that type of thing these days to see how deep water is. You probably have that gadget in the boat that tells you, but back then, they dropped something in the water that told them how deep it was and found that they were quickly drawing close to the shore. Straightway, they let down their 4 anchors to keep the ship until the light would come closer to the bank. So to make it easier to see, all they knew was they were drawing closer, so they just threw all 4 anchors down to stop the ship. They were just too close. So you can imagine the panic That's what I'm trying to draw a picture here. The panic that they went through when they were like, oh no, we're too close. We can't see anything. We can't tell, what's going on. We're just panicked. We are just freaking out of what's going on right now. So they were in great panic and they were in great fear of what was going on. And they knew they had prisoners on the boat. They had a preacher on the boat. They had soldiers on the boat. They had merchants on the boat. It said they had many people on the boat. But this is where I want to bring us to and let us think about. Because this is where all of us Christians come to at times. We all feel like we don't have a place at times. Whether we're the preacher's wife, whether we're the layman in the church, the song leader, the harmonica player, the guitar player, part of the praise team, whatever it is that we're part of. But Paul discovered a plot of the crew and alerted the centurion, the soldier, of them trying to depart. Although this might seem to be a very normal discovery, it was part of God's protection of the lives of the vessel. The Lord promised to keep everyone safe on the ship, but this was for all the crew that would have, if it would be a devastation for all the crew if they changed their situation. Therefore, God showed Paul that they were about to leave the vessel and fulfill his promise would not be fulfilled if they left the ship. So what was happening is they were about to leave. They were about to leave the ship and decide that they were not going to stay. They were too close. They were going to drop down the small boats. They were going to leave the rest of the crew. While there were many strong men on the ship, they needed the crew and everyone there to be safe. The soldiers, the merchants, the prisoners, and the preacher could not navigate the dangerous waters as well as the crew could. Thus they all would have been lost. When people leave the Lord, they don't just hurt themselves, but many others. Families are shipwrecked. They're lost because of parents that leave God. People in churches are shipwrecked because some leaders have backslidden. It's impossible to leave God without hindering someone else's relationship with Him. If you think about that, when parents slip or parents fall away, the children suffer. Their family suffers. So by them leaving the ship, the rest were going to suffer because the crew was leaving. The other ones didn't know how to navigate the ship. Let me tell you something. If you get Sister Myers out there on the ship and you leave the ship, I may be smart on some things, but I don't know much about that. I don't know how to drive a boat. I've never drove a boat before. You can show me how. I love to ride on a boat. I love to be in the water. I love it, absolutely love it, but I don't know how to do it. I'm not afraid of the water. I'm not afraid to swim. I don't know how to ride on it. I don't know how to do it. But if you put somebody out there who knows how, don't leave me out there. Let's work together and figure it out. So that's kind of what they were saying. The sailors would have been lost if they tried to leave the ship, because God promised from their lives that their lives would be spared if they leave the ship, that the promise would be broken and He would not keep His promise if they left each other. So this is where I want to bring us together here, where the Lord brought them back together and where they let everything go, which was amazing to me in Scripture when I studied it out this week. It says, when the soldiers cut off the ropes, in verse 32, when the soldiers heard that only those on the ship would be saved, they cut off the possibility to escape. All possibility to escape was gone. The crew could have been tempted with the lifeboats, but they were all gone. All that temptation they left. This makes the crew work harder and fervently to keep the ship afloat. The only way that one was going to live a Christian life is to cut away the possibilities of backsliding. It's not even an option to leave the Lord. It's not even an option to get a divorce. It's not even an option to walk away from God. It's not even an option to go the easy way out. That's the way you have to look at it. We're going to fight this battle. We're going to work this out. I'm not walking away from it. So that's exactly what they did. It's not an option. Temptations must be forsaken. Friends may have to be left, but the most important thing is to stay safely on the way to heaven. Many times people keep things they should have thrown away just in case it doesn't work out. No wonder it did not work out. They still have the lifeboat to the world on board. If only we'll give a wholehearted effort, they will stay saved. We can't leave the lifeboat on the side of the boat if we know we don't need to ever use that lifeboat. Pastors preach many times about the man who said, no thank you, but thank you. Pastors preach many times about the man who said, the preacher that came in and he found Marlboros on the mantle and he said, why do you have those there? You stop smoking. He said, that's just in case. That's just in case I ever decide I want one or I backslide. I have them there already. I don't have to go to the store and get them. That's just in case. We need to leave the just in case away. We need to leave the phone number out of the phone and delete it just in case it don't work out or just in case. We need to let all those things go. We need to take that outfit out of the closet just in case we decide we want to wear it again if that's our temptation. Or whatever, just in case. Whatever's our temptation has got to go. You got to break away from that just in case or temptation. That's the things that hold us back from the Lord. Whatever's keeping us or holding us is keeping us fully from God, just in case. So he had to let all those things go. So in verse 34, it was the provision of strength. It says, this is for your wealth. Paul offered them food for their physical strength, for many must have been weakened by their lack of eating and their great workload. These men needed strength for the storm and the trial of the shipwreck. To continue with little food would have made everything more difficult. Paul comforted them with words of safety also. He offered the statement that there will not be a hair fall from their head of any of them. This just simply meant that the least harm would come to those that were sailing on the ship. God would protect them. The problem is, a lot of times we feel like the Lord forsook us or the Lord's not there for us. That's exactly what the devil does. He will make us feel like it's God's fault. That's what the devil does. Well, this happened to you because God's punishing you. Or this happened to you because God's mad at you. Or this happened to you because you're in trouble for something. Or whatever it may be. So that's usually why that we get so upset with the Lord. Because if he can get us mad at God, then we'll turn our back on him. Because not normally would we be so mad or get upset with such a wonderful someone who's not done us wrong, who forgave us of our sin or, things. So we feel like we're being punished or we're being, done wrong from the Lord. That's what the devil does. The Lord took your son because he took him to be mean, or he took your daughter to be mean. I've heard many people say, just this week I was talking to somebody. I went on a trip, pick up Maddie from Georgia, and I was talking to somebody, a family member. One of Brother Meyer's family members had called Amanda. I was with her. She rode with me to keep us awake. We went along. We drove 7 hours there and turned around, drove 7 hours back. We never stopped at all. Well, stopped for a minute to get a drink or whatever, but didn't stop to sleep. And we planned to, but we didn't. And anyway, she called and said, I need you to pray for my son. He's threatening to commit suicide. She said, and he's on drugs and all this stuff. She said, But I don't have faith anymore like you do because God took my baby and I'm still mad at him for that. That was like years and years and years ago. And I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. I'm not as close to the family, that part of the family. And so she said, the problem is you need to pull your bootstraps up and you need to get that faith for yourself and you need to let that go. God didn't do that to you. You need to realize that. Sometimes we do things ourselves or sometimes things just happen. It rains on the just and the unjust. And sometimes we don't understand why. Sometimes things happen. I lost a child myself. I went through that myself. I don't know, and there's no reason for me to know why. Maybe there's a reason. We just have to understand that. But she wanted to use our faith to get through, and we were trying to explain to her. She was trying to explain to her. I wasn't in the conversation that you have to grab a hold of that yourself and get through those things. And so that's exactly what Paul was telling them here. Paul wasn't even the preacher on board at the time. He was one of the prisoners on board at the time. He was actually, we're going to get to the end of this, they were supposed to go over to the land and they were going to kill all the prisoners when they got there. And Paul was going to be one of the ones killed when they got over there. He wasn't actually the one, but because of what Paul had done and showed the Lord in him, they decided not to do that. They showed favor for Paul. So we have to realize that the Lord hadn't done us nothing but good. And the bad things that happen here on earth don't come from the Lord. They come from the devil. Everything that's happened to me that's been bad, I can look back at and see that it has the signature of Satan on. It did not have the Lord on those things. I had to realize that because the devil tried to tell me that the Lord did it and he didn't. It was all the works of the devil to torment me. Okay, verse 36 says, were they all good cheer? Remember last week we talked about they were in good cheer and how he tried to keep them in good spirits and those things. But it says the food and encouraging words and prayer of Paul had an effect upon the men. They were all of good cheer. Courage arose in their hearts and hope burned in their soul. One person with a positive faith and influence many others. We can do that also. One good thing needs to be pointed out in this story. The sailors were about to desert the ship earlier, but there is not a hint of animosity towards them. Everyone in the storm together forgave the crew for their misdeed. So that was very important for everyone to know. They were going to leave the crew. Remember, the crew was going to leave the rest of the ship and just let them die. Listen, we know what's fixing to happen. We know how close we are to the shore. We know we're fixing to be, overboard. We know this. We realize this. They were fixing to leave them, but when they realized, they let go of walking away, they said, that's it. We're not going to do it anymore. All the animosity and the problems were gone. They forgave them. They all became one mind and one accord, and there was no bad feelings. Because of that, they were able to have good cheer. If there was bad feelings, they could not have all grew together on the ship to come see the ending result of the good things that was about to happen. It says maybe they felt merciful because they all knew the fear and hopelessness they all experienced in the storm. For whatever reason, they did restore the crew to the ship. This was for their own safety as well as the safety and security of the rest of the soldiers, merchants, and prisoners. It reminds Paul of the astonishment of this. It reminded Paul of the church about a fallen brother or brethren. If a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such as one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou be tempted. That's huge. So in other words, be merciful. Because if I'm not merciful to Sister Jackson for what she's going through, guess what? It's probably going to happen to me. People say, watch what you say to somebody else, and they talk about, It does happen. I've told people before, I don't wish this on my worst enemy. I've never prayed something bad on somebody, because guess what? You pray it bad on them and it'll come right back to you. You pray peace and joy and love, and you let the Lord take care of it, because when they fall into the hands of a just God, He'll take care of it. You let the Lord, you pray, the Lord, let them see themselves the way you see them, and you work it out and let them see what kind of person that they are. Let them see the things that they've done wrong. Let them see the way that they're acting. So we have to be careful. I got to get done here quickly. Okay, the Soldiers' Council. I didn't hear you. No, I'm not saying I'm doing that. I'm not doing that. I didn't circle the runway. Day came to those 276 on board of the vessel. They wondered what needed to be done, for the land was unfamiliar. Seeing a creek, they wanted to thrust the ship into that area, hoping to be able to get to land. Verse 41 tells us that they went into a place where two seas met, and they ran the ship aground, and four parts struck it fast and remained unmovable. But the hinder part was broken to the violence of the waters. It was obvious that the ship was lost, but they had little control over the passengers, what the passengers would do. Therefore, the soldiers advised that they should kill the prisoners. They was commissioned to keep these men all the way to Rome, but there was only one assurance that the duty would be fulfilled. Remember, I told you when they got there that they were going to kill all the prisoners, but they decided not to because of what Paul had done. But they ran the ship quickly into where the two places met. And the Lord had already told Paul that there would be no loss of life, but that the ship would be destroyed. So this is what happened. And in the last verse, he said that the ones that could swim, swam to shore, and the ones that couldn't swim, that last verse said, let me read it to you, and the rest, some on board and some on broken pieces of the ship, and so it came to pass that they escaped all safe to land. So it said that, I'll get them in a minute. So it said that they got all the way to the end of the land, the ones that swam, and the ones that couldn't swim grabbed a piece of the boards and got to land, and when he counted everyone, all were there safely. So Scripture was fulfilled, and the end was fulfilled, that when the Lord said what He was going to do, it was done correctly. So we have assurance in the storm and safety in a shipwreck, and in our life, when we feel like our life is in a shipwreck, that there is safety in the end of a shipwreck. It's not all going to be bad. It does seem like it gets dark, and it does seem like that our storms we get overwhelmed and we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. But there is joy in the journey if we will hold on till the end. So my closing thought is, keep holding on. Keep holding on to the Lord. There is hope. There is heaven. We have heaven to gain. Any thoughts? Because Pastor has walked away. Catherine. Oh, you're afraid of what? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Really? Okay. Okay. Anybody else have a thought? All right. I'm going to turn the order of the service over to Brother Farmer, and I'm going to let him pray and change the order of the service because he's good at that.